Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Life Chronicles and Deep Dives podcast. I'm here with Coach Cornelia, all the way in Romania.
Hello and welcome back.
And my name is Coach Micah Ranjit, and we'll be talking with you today in our fourth episode about building confidence and perspective, relativity, and reality.
Those are great ones. Looking forward to talk about it.
So let's talk about building confidence first. All right. So you're born, you travel out into the world, or you're brought out into the world, with your parents, right? And you have these life experiences, and we'll keep touching back with like the life experiences and then putting the tools in the toolbox, right? But this is a little bit different. Each experience that you go through is going to be a series of variations of the same experience, or a new experience, and then experiencing variations of that, right? To build confidence, those experiences need to happen, right? So a person needs to have an experience and learn from it, but then succeed in whatever that experience is, or gain something a little bit better, right? So
Yeah.
let's say if my experience is learning how to walk, right? Okay, so I'm standing up, so I've made it that far. So I've got a little bit of confidence in myself that I'm able to hold myself upright. Now, to take the next step, that's where the big confidence comes into play. So I take the experiences that I've learned before. Okay, well, I can get up, I can crawl, I can now stand up. I've got myself standing up, right? So now I've built that confidence and I'm ready to take that next step. That stepping point is where confidence comes into play, and it's such a big part of like growing and in life that you'll have variations of that experience going forward throughout your life. So an interaction with a person, right? You want to introduce yourself to somebody. Throughout your life, you will continue to introduce yourself to other people. As you do it, the more confident you become, because you'll either have success and you'll move forward with a relationship, not a doesn't have to be a romantic relationship, any kind of like communicating relationship, or it won't go well and you'll learn something from it, right? Now,
Yeah.
on the negative side, you may not gain any confidence, right? But you will learn to do something different that may be successful. So, before I dive into talking about additional steps to gain confidence, what are some of your takes on gaining confidence and working through life in that?
I was talking to a friend who wanted to become a basketball player, but he was very small of stature.
Mhm.
Uh, but he had that confidence behind him. It was the way he grew up when his parents always told him, "You can do anything you want. You can do anything you want, and you can do anything you want." So he believed that as well. But he was not training enough. He was just playing around with some friends, but he was dreaming about becoming a really great star in basketball. So when we decided to do this topic, I was thinking about him, and the first thing that came into my mind was that in order to have confidence, you have to have a lot of work behind. It doesn't matter if it's in your profession or if it's about yourself. You have to have some work behind to build that confidence. Like you said, you put some work into crawling, then you put some work into standing up, and so this work is backing you up in building that confidence. If you just say I'm confident that I can do anything without putting some work, you sound a little bit crazy, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I mean, so like there are some people that can like like the first time they do something, they're successful at it, and then they're just successful at it for the rest of their lives doing whatever it is that they're doing, right? And so, like, you look at them and that particular act, and in some way, right? So let's say if it was somebody that was like, okay, I want to be, a basketball superstar, right? Like your example, right? Even though they're small stature, and they shoot a basket, but no matter where they're standing on the court, every time they shoot the basket, they're making the shot. I mean, we're talking about something that's probably improbable at this point. So without practice, right?
Yeah.
Without practice. Now there is a case where somebody might have like whether it's like one of the many a very small amount of cases where somebody has like savants where they get, like they just achieve something great, usually from a head injury. But we're not talking about that. We're
Mm,
talking about building confidence. So let's see. I've got a couple steps here that because building confidence is kind of like a gradual process, right? So
yeah.
it doesn't just start like we talked about, going from the crawling to the standing to the walking, right? So just that in itself is the first, option to start building confidence. Whether it's okay, I want to go out on more dates, or I want to be more independent, or I want to, whatever your goal is, right? There's always a way to break it down into smaller steps. So if you're sitting on the ground and you're like, I want to run, right? You don't just like magically float up onto your feet and start running at, 20 miles an hour,
Mm,
right? You take those steps, right? So one of the best ways to build confidence is actually to break down a larger goal into small achievable steps. Okay, so like you've always heard that phrase, one step at a time.
mm,
So by doing those small achievable steps, right, you're incentivizing yourself through success and learning to achieve the bigger goal, right? And once
yeah.
that bigger goal is achieved, then you can move into, another goal. Or, let's say you're moving several goals, not moving, let's say you're trying to achieve several goals at the same time. That can be kind of daunting to take on all of those things all at the same time. So breaking them down into smaller steps can be a lot easier, right? So you want to learn how to, I don't know, you want to learn how to use a cell phone, right? Cell phones are crazy. They've got all sorts of stuff. I know people that have cell phones that they're just so overwhelmed with all the apps, all the logins, all the passwords, and all of
Yeah.
the camera functions, right? That's crazy.
It is.
How would you get to a point? Well, you don't just pick up the phone and just start doing every single program, every single app, and just like using all of it all at once, right? You pick one app, you take a time to learn it and get used to it, right? You adjust to it, and then once you've got that one, then you kind of like move on to like another app that's more intense, right? I mean, typically you're going to use all of the basic apps right out the gate, but you're going to take the time to figure those ones out first, small step, then you will go into the other ones, right?
I also think we have to make a separation between building confidence as a person or a professional. Because I don't know if you've seen this movie. I never remember how movies are called, but there's one movie where the guy in his particular life is pretty has a pretty sad life. He doesn't have a girlfriend. He's never had one. He lives alone. He doesn't have friends. But in his profession, he's full of confidence. He's a different person because he's been working a lot. He's been learning a lot. He took all those steps you're talking about in his case, going to school, being the best there, going to another class and being the best there, and so on, until he became one of your best. I'm talking about a guy from the United States, one of your best inspectors on what's that called? Not IRS? Is it IRS? With the
Oh,
financial
I don't know. Oh
system.
yeah, that'd be an IRS agent. Yeah.
So he was one of the best IRS agents in the United States. But and he wrote a book and he was talking about how he was extremely confident that he had the nose for finding, let's say, uh, unlawfully things in
Right.
his business.
Like tax fraud or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. But in his private life, he didn't have any confidence. So somehow, in some situation, we can be this or that. It depends on what we're putting the work on, right?
Right. So we've talked about like a physical act, right? So this could be something that's like in the gym, right? You're learning a new exercise or, whatever, walking to running, right? Sorry, crawling to running, right? We've looked at, using like technology, using a cell phone, getting through that, building confidence using that technology, right? You've just now touched into like a personal aspect. So a guy's really successful in business, right? But he's not so successful in his personal life. He doesn't really practice. So let's take an example of how we can break down small steps that way, right? So asking somebody out on a date, right? You hear this a lot, right? It takes
Yeah, yeah,
confidence to go up and ask somebody out on a date, and
yes,
especially in the face of rejection, right?
yeah.
So how do you get to that point? Well, sometimes like when I'm at the mall, I see the kids, and then you're like all in groups, and then you see like that one guy who's like, he wants to go ask the girl out, and he like starts to walk towards her, then he immediately turns around and everybody starts giggling, right? So he didn't build up that confidence level to get to that interaction, right? So it takes practice, and it takes small steps, but in some cases, right? So you can practice that small step, interacting with friends, practicing with friends, right? But in some cases, like a big personal development is going to be to steps outside of that comfort zone and actually take a big step. So we've broken down small steps, right? But a big step this person may need to take to gain that interaction, to gain that connection, is to just go over there and do that. Now that's the problem. Like a lot of people, they start getting the second guesses, right? They start walking over them and they turn away, or they say, okay, well, man, if I ask that person out, they're not gonna say yes, and so I'm not gonna do it, right? Well, if you don't ask, you'll never know, right? So if you don't go over there and start that interaction, you don't know what the outcome is going to be. You're basing the outcome off of an emotion that is based off of lack of experience, and the only way to get the experience is to go do it, right?
But Michael, what if you, let's say you, this is facing fear, like we were talking the last time. It's
Right.
facing a fear. So you're facing this fear, you're overcoming it, you're going to the girl and ask her out. What if she says no?
Well, so I did a video on like absolute peace and freedom, so I'm going to drop some of that little bit hinted here, right? So to have absolute peace and freedom, it takes the willingness of everyone on the planet to cease to want to control and instill their will on anybody else,
Mm.
right? So if you ask somebody out and that person says no, you accept it, right? You say, okay, all right, well, that didn't work. And you say, well, what did I learn from it? Okay, well, everyone's going through their own walk of life. So this girl could, already have somebody. This girl could be saying no because she actually does like him, but she wants him to try harder. It could be a manipulation. Who knows, right? It could be a negative aspect. It could just be somebody that, like, maybe they're just not interested, right? Whatever the reason is, right? They've got their own. Now, the guy who walked up to ask the girl out, he's learned something about himself. He took that step to go over there, right? So the next time he faces rejection, it'll sting just a little bit less. So that's your gain, right? So if you if you go and I hate to say this, like if you go and you ask a whole bunch of people out, you're likely to get, nine no's and one yes. Okay. Right. But as you're working your way through those nine no's, you won't be so worried about it. Right. And the one yes you get will be that much better, right? And then you'll be like, okay, well, this worked, right? So now how do I move forward with that? I'm not saying as soon as you ask somebody out to go ask somebody else out. What I'm saying is that you've moved through the rejection, you faced your fears, right? And now that fear, right, has, subsided. It's not
Yeah.
a big fear anymore. All right, so I'm going to move into the next one, which is going to be focusing on strengths, right? So building confidence, focusing on strengths. You would want to focus on things that you're good at. And I'm not saying don't do things that you're not good at, right? I'm not saying like avoid things that you're bad at, right? It's always good to attempt those things, right? But when it comes to building confidence, right? And you really want to internally build confidence to maybe tackle one of those things you're not good at. The easiest way to do that is to focus on things that you are good at, right? So, like, let's say if you're good with your hands, you're good at carving or painting pictures on canvas or sculpting stuff with clay, right? You're good with your hands, okay? Do those things. Take those hobbies and practice them and get good. That builds confidence that will carry over into, other aspects of your life that may not carry as much confidence doing, right? So like let's say if I'm not good at let's go back to the cell phone thing. Let's say if I'm not good at cell phones, but I'm good at making pottery, painting, and carving, little sculptures out of, wood, right? Because I'm good at those things, I've learned that I can learn new skills. I've learned that
Yeah.
I'm good with my hands, right? And that will apply to picking up that cell phone and learning those apps and learning how to use it. I mean, it's not necessarily a straight crossover, but it is, something good that people can focus on. Taking good things that you're good at allows you to build energy, right? That you can then take and carry. Like, I mean, you could even take, hey, I'm good at building stuff with my hands. I'm good at painting and I'm good at, carving wood sculptures. I can take that positive energy and go ask a girl out with that,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
Or, at least work my way towards doing that, building those small steps, again, breaking down the larger goal into smaller goals. What do you think about focusing on strengths? How do you feel about that one?
I feel it of course is very important. Like when you want to build confidence, you have to start with something that you know a little, at least you know a little bit about that, right? Um, but one one of the other strengths I think is very important is not allowing the others being your inner voice, because so many times it happens that someone comes and says you cannot do this, you can't do that, and it's so important not to listen to these voices, and just it's also, I think it's also a strength not to listen, and it's very hard not to listen to those voices.
Right?
I have friends who are very very good at taking those voices and transform it into success. And Also Novak Djokovic. I don't know if you watch tennis, but Djokovic is one of the athletes that can take the hate from the public sometimes and transform it into a huge success. That's a strength.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I've done a whole video on transforming negativity into success.
Mm.
Definitely good point bringing that one up. And then we're going to throw another one here, right? So stepping out of your comfort zone, right? So we're building confidence. We're taking things that we're good at doing and we're doing them, right? And that's building confidence, right? Another big way to build confidence is to and that's like a building block. So doing things you're good at are building blocks for confidence to get to that point of stepping out of your comfort zone, right? So when you step out of your comfort zone, that in itself is an act of confidence, courage, right? Um, when you do something that you've never done before, right? So let's say if you were, Cornelia, were to set a box in front of me, and inside that box, there was something that I needed to do that I've never done before in my entire life: knit a sweater. Um, so I wouldn't know how to do that, right? But eventually, by learning, right? Let's say there was a book in there that taught me how to do that, or there, like there's an instructional video or something. There's somebody there, you could show me how to do the knitting, right? Stepping out of that comfort zone is a great way to build confidence because it allows people to challenge themselves for one, and two, when they are successful, it is a great confidence booster to be successful. Now, like you
Probably
said,
it's probably one of the most powerful boosters in confidence when you're starting something that you don't know anything about it and you can do it. It is the biggest booster.
absolutely, and it's quite powerful to be able to take that experience and transform it to more activities, more experiences, more interactions and connections.
Yeah, that's right.
The next way to build confidence, right? And so this is a trick that I learned in military service is visualization of success or visualization of the task. Okay. So to do visualization, it's not just like you're watching yourself in third person. Well, that isn't a way to do it. We want to visualize from a first person perspective, like you're actually doing the task, right? Now, you'd have to know something about the task that you're doing in order to visualize it. But by visualizing yourself doing it in first person, paying attention to all of your senses: sight, sound, hearing, touch, taste, smell. By paying attention to all of those senses, you're immersing yourself in that environment, in that task. So your body actually doesn't, your brain's not going to differentiate between a
Yeah.
visualization and reality. So let's say if I need to, I don't know, swim 1,000 feet, right? 1,000 meters. Okay. And I've only ever done a swim up to 500 meters. Okay. So I know what swimming is, right? I just need to visualize myself through that process, right? I need to visualize myself being successful at the end of that process. Okay. So in the first person, using that muscle memory, using that mental memory, using that sensational memory to build that confidence towards that success. Have you
Yeah,
ever
I should
used visualization
no,
before?
no, I don't really believe in it, but I should try it. It sounds interesting when you're saying it. I've
So
never
I
tried.
can actually guide you through some meditations that are designed to help you visualize. So I do offer meditations and breath work. So through that visualization process, like achieving tasks, um, can become a lot easier, and it can be a great way to build your confidence by visualizing yourself before you do it. You can build confidence to actually do the tasks that you're trying to do.
It's very interesting. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I should try it sometime. Sometimes. I've never thought about it like in first person, and that's something that changes for me. Changes a little bit how I see it.
Right, so like when people say visualize, usually, you'd imagine that you'd be looking at yourself outside, right, as
Ex-
a third
yeah,
party observer watching you do
yeah,
this, right? In order to work on, I mean, and that will work in to some degree, but in order to build confidence, the best way to visualize is doing it in first person, like you're actually completing the task. Like if you look down while you're visualizing, obviously your eyes are going to be closed, so you can immerse yourself in the environment. You're going to create the environment with your imagination, and then you're going to visualize the task. So when you look down, you should be able to actually see your hands in front of you, even though your eyes are closed, through visualization.
Mm,
And then, like, let's say if it's knitting the sweater, right? So I've looked in this book. I know the process for knitting the sweater. Whatever the weave is, the over under. I don't know anything about knitting, but I'm gonna have to go look it up after this after this podcast, right? Um, if I wanted to visualize how to do it, right, I'd close my eyes and then I'd imagine my hands, and I would be using my hands in real time in front of me, right?
mm,
And
mm-hmm.
and literally acting it out, and then trying to cue my senses to feel, the tools that I'd be using in my hand, to feel the material that I'd be manipulating to make, the sweater. So when I'm going to that depth of detail, it really tricks the brain to believing that you're actually doing something, right?
Yeah.
And by doing that, you're able to step towards actually doing it through that visualization process, building confidence.
You made me very curious about it. I remember I've experienced this first person thing when I've done some regressions, but not with. Usually, when I try to, I was talking about my fears the last time, and sometimes my therapist try to do some small hypnotic sessions to try to get me over some fears, but it was in the third person, so it didn't really work for me. This is why I said that I don't really find myself there. But now that you're saying that you can do it on the first person, I'm very curious about it, and I really want to try it to see how it is.
Yeah, I mean, we'll schedule you in for a meditation, and you can give it a try. I mean, we'll
Yeah.
start out with something small, and we'll take it up to something big.
Mm. Yeah.
And that brings me to the last step in building confidence, that I wanted to talk about today, which really touches on all of the other ones, which is prepare and practice, right? So, like, if we prepare, right, we've gone from sitting to crawling to standing to walking to running. And then in later example, swimming, apparently.
Mm.
Now, right? So we've taken those steps, right? So we've prepared ourselves through taking steps. Not only have we prepared ourselves, we practice each time. You don't just take one step or get on a bike and just start biking off and you're successful. There's some people that might be, but like, um, you take that first step, and then you catch your balance, and then you take the next step, or you pedal once and then you pedal twice, and you might fall over and you get back up and you do it again, right? Preparing and practicing, repetition, visualization, breaking down small steps. If you're doing all of these things, no matter what task it is, if it's interacting with other people or achieving a goal in the gym, in business, in life, you're going to build confidence, and it's going to guide you towards success.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. uh the last thing I want to say on this topic is this never give up cliche, that it's always true somehow in any situation, no matter what we're talking about. Is this never give up? Just keep going, and you're gonna get there.
Absolutely. And that's, like, that's like the key hallmark of preparing and practicing, is like you're constantly doing it to get, you know, confidence. And then when you're successful, you take on something else. So we're going to move into the second topic of the podcast: perspective, relativity, and reality. So, Cornelia, why don't you take this one away?
So when I'm thinking about perspective, I'm thinking about how we translate the world around us according to our beliefs and how we grew up and what we think about things, what principles we have. That's the perspective we have on life. The great thing about it is you can have many perspectives on the same situation or thing. And for me, this was a relief when I first find out, let's say, when I was in therapy, the fact that I can change my mind in a situation, a given situation. So being able to change your perspective is very important for your well-being, first of all, because sometimes we can find ourselves in a situation where we hurt, or we don't feel comfortable with. But if we try to see another perspective on that situation, we might feel much better. And this is what I'm doing, having the right to change my mind. It's the greatest thing that I've achieved in the last 10 years. That's about perspective, just to start with. Then relativity, I like to refer on it, because I can find it. You can apply Einstein equation about relativity. It's that one is about physics and time and space, but I can find that you can apply it in your real life on every single thing you do, because everything, Einstein said everything is relative, right? So he gave this example when, of course, he was referring at the time, but the example is very, very easy to understand. It's when you sit with a woman for an hour, it can look like a minute. When you stay with your hand on a very hot stove, it for a minute it might look like an hour. So that's relativity. So perspective and relativity go hand in hand, and using them, you can have a really much better quality of your life. What do you think?
Absolutely. So perspective, what what I would call, like a bias, right? So bias doesn't have to be negative, right?
Yeah,
Um, when you are looking at something and somebody else is looking at something, both individuals will have different perspectives. For instance, no two people see exactly the same shade of color. Um, so it's different perspective if we just want to break it down to the very small thing. But right, let's say if we're watching a situation unfold in front of us, right? Let's say there is a situation unfolding. There's two people and they're talking, and one's got their hands up and waving around, and they're hyper energetic, but I can't see their face, right? You can see their face. On the other hand, I can see the other person that's facing me, that they're talking to, right? And that person, I see that that person is, smiling, right? But you can't see that that person's smiling. You can only see the person that's all energetic and waving their hands, right? So from my perspective, the other person, the receiving person in this instance is, like having a good time. It's like a joke, whatever they're interacting with. It's just a high energy person talking to somebody who's laughing, right? From your perspective, you can't see that smile on that person's face. So you see, somebody that's just high energy, like getting in somebody's face, and I see something positive, you're seeing something negative from that interaction, right? And that is like a simple version of an interaction view based off of observation, right? But also perspective, like you said, is based off of, like, upbringing, right? Belief systems, culture,
yeah,
religion, like whatever you take on and build into your identity will also affect your perspective.
right. Yeah, that's true. I want to also talk a little bit about having control on uh, choosing your perspective, because having a little bit of control, it's been a study made on two dogs. I found it a little bit sadistic, but it showed what it should show. Two dogs in two boxes, with a wire, with electrical wire in between the boxes, and the scientists were just turning the electricity on. The dogs, of course, were getting scared. One of the dogs was having a button inside the box, and he could press it and stop the electricity. So time went by. They were starting the electricity. The dog with the button discovered the button and started to use it. After a few weeks, the dog without a button became very depressed, very sad. The other one was much happier because he had a little bit of control over the situation. So they had the same perspective. I'm in a box with electrical wire inside, but this time I can press the button and stop it. So I have a little bit control over it. So I think it's very important when you change your perspective. It can be a good help to have a little bit of control. I've seen this TED talk about an unemployed person and a retired one. So they have, the guy was saying that they have about the same life, right? They don't have too many things to do and they don't have a lot of money. But the retired one, because it was a decision to become retired, right, has a much happier life because it was his choice to do it. Whereas the unemployed is not that happy because it wasn't his choice to remain without a job. It's the same situation with two different perspectives. So that's what perspective is, and what's this is why I wanted to bring a little bit the control in. When you have a little bit of control, you see things differently than when something happens without you having this control. It's very hard to change perspective on that thing.
Absolutely. I think it's important also, and you actually brought this into the conversation, but you didn't say the specific words, open-mindedness, right? So you're going control, but you also brought in open-mindedness, right? So um, being able to change your mind, right, is part of having an open mind. And I'm sure we'll do a whole different, podcast on, being mindful and being open-minded. But for this particular thing, right, having that ability to look at your perspective, right, now we can apply, those internal biases, those things that we've learned throughout life, our upbringing, our culture, like the moods and emotions that we're experiencing, even if we're detached from the situation that we're observing, and our belief systems and all of that stuff. And then we can just say, okay, well, I'm looking at this thing, but I want to apply my life to it and my experiences so I have understanding of this
Right.
interaction, this event that's happening, right?
Yeah.
And that's what it is, right? But because we may be wrong, right? We have to, and I think a lot of people have trouble observing things and then being willing to be wrong inside, and then even more so externally wrong. So when they're observing something, if they are wrong, a lot of them take like a not like a major one, but then some degree an ego injury, an ego bruise, not to the degree that a narcissist would when they're wrong, but a small degree of ego injury if they are wrong. Being open minded prevents that ego injury from happening, but also allows for different perspectives to come into play
Ex-
and allows, the open exchange of ideas, freedom of speech, freedom of ideas, and the free flow of information. So I think definitely touching on being open minded when perceiving something is a good idea.
Yeah, for sure. And you said a great thing about accepting that you may be wrong, being willing to accept that you've been wrong. It might be freeing for you to say, I was wrong about this. And then changing the mind comes with it. And then many of the times it comes a relief because being able, for example, let's say someone lost their jobs, right? So they can see it in many ways, but they are so angry or upset because they have bills to pay, they have kids to grow, and so on. They only have this perspective that I lost my job, I lost my job. What am I going to do? The other perspective can be, okay, I have a new situation where I can grow. Maybe I can be more successful. I can find something that I like more. I can earn much more. So you can by changing perspective, you can change even your life, and this is when a life coach can help, right?
Absolutely.
One of the first things you do in a life coaching session, changing perspectives and finding new ones that can help you achieving your goals, let's say.
Absolutely. I think that was definitely a good point, is that making those perspective shifts, those mindset shifts, and being open minded to change, and being open minded to being wrong. and learning from it is definitely a great way to move forward in life and seek new opportunities and personal growth. Absolutely.
You're talking about ego.
Mhm.
Whether we want it or not, we all have it, and it's very hard to ignore it. So I I wanted to say that it's very worthy to ignore your ego and to accept that you can see things differently, or maybe I don't know, some of your principles are not serving you anymore. It's for me personally, it was such a relief to know that I have a right to change my mind. This is a right that everyone has, and we should use it more. We have the right to change our minds, and this brings changing our lives.
Absolutely. Changing your minds, changing your perspective, your point of view, right? I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to change your entire belief system, doesn't mean you have to change something else, but also changing your perspective, changing perspectives in general can lead to a more peaceful life. And I'm not saying betray yourself, I'm not saying betray your identity, but being open to a different perspective could lead to a more peaceful life. And in fact, if more people were open minded, I'm going to touch in on my little short that I had. If everyone was willing to cease their control and and cease instilling their will on other people, right? We'd have a peace, right? There'd be freedom and peace, right?
Yeah,
So
that's a beautiful video. I've seen it, and I it made me think about things.
absolutely. So I know about relativity, the theory of relativity, and Albert Einstein,
Yeah.
specifically just because I took a science class, in high school, and then I also, I also have seen a couple of sci-fi movies, several sci-fi
Hmm.
movies. Space, time, and gravity is kind of like where I'm at with relativity. Why don't you break it down for me a little bit better so I can have an understanding?
I don't understand the physics around this equation. I must be honest. I haven't been good at physics. I wished I'd had a maybe better teachers to learn more about it. But what I found interesting is that, and I am applying it in my daily life. So the fact that Einstein already proved that time is relative, space is relative, and so on. So this is where I come in and I say everything is relative, and this is why we shouldn't take things too personal, because everything is relative. I was telling you this story about the two newlyweds that were having a small house, and they went to the priest, and they said our house is very small. I think many people know this story. We have such a small house. What can we do about it? And the priest said, bring the cow in. Oh, what? Why should we? Just bring it and come back to me in 3 days. They went back in 3 days. They said, bring two of your cousins into your house. And things went like this for about 2 or 3 weeks, where they brought in the house many animals and friends and so on. And after this time, the priest said, okay, right now you can take everybody and all the animals out of the house. And the house all of a sudden became very empty, right? Because it was very crowded, of course. So this is relativity. In my opinion, everything is relative. It depends on perspective, right? And this is where I tie them so much. Um, because everything is relative, you cannot be sure about anything. You cannot say this is like this because it's relative.
So like let's say if I'm looking at a wall and you're looking at a wall and we're standing right next to each other, we have I mean there's it's almost guaranteed that while the color will be close to the same,
Yeah.
it's not going to be exactly the same because our
And
eyes are built different.
yeah, at the same time, let's say someone asks you how long did you stare at that wall, and you say 5 minutes and it's been 20 minutes. And if they ask me, I'm going to say 1 hour, and they're going to say it's been 5 minutes. And this is because everything is relative in accordance to how we feel inside. right? So it depends so much on how we feel inside. Maybe I loved that wall, and those 5 minutes for me felt like, when you dive deep into, let's say, a picture, right? And you feel like the time stands still, and you just feel the connection with that picture, let's say, right?
Mhm.
What, but if you don't like that wall, let's say, it might seem like you've been staying there for a very long time, and just it doesn't end already, right?
Right.
That's relativity for me. And if everything is relative, it means that we can change easily, can change perspective. It's not a big deal. It's not an ego thing, like you're saying. We have to just accept it,
Mhm.
and it's easier for us to go forward.
Absolutely. So that you brought up a good point. You were talking about like let's say, and I'll bring us back. We're both staring at a wall, right? Let's say if you love to look at this wall, right? So
Mhm.
and then I don't like to look at this wall, right? Obviously, we're seeing two different. We're seeing very close to the same color, but it's not going to be exactly the same, and there's no way to really tell unless you plug a computer into both of our brains, and even then, who knows, right? But we're both staring at this wall.
Yeah.
You love to look at the wall. I don't like to look at the wall. So for every minute that we're standing there, for me, it's going to feel like, and this is a perspective, right? But it's also relativity, right? For me, it's going to be 1 minute's going to feel like 20 minutes just standing there at the wall, right? I'm going to be like, can we go? What are we doing? I'm like
Yeah.
trying to look around, right? For you, 1 minute, and you're like, man, now we got to go. I just got here, right? So, I mean, I think that, I mean, combining perspective and relativity is definitely a good, outlook because, like, absolutely nothing is absolute, right? So,
Exactly.
and that is also um, true.
So if you're,
Um,
after we are staring at that wall, and someone asks you, what did you think about that wall? And you're gonna say it's ugly. And they ask me, and I say it's beautiful. So that's relativity. It depends who's watching it and who's feeling it, right? That's relativity. And then it comes, the perspectives comes, and they say, so that's your perspective, and that's her perspective on
mhm.
how the wall
So the
is.
experience, right? So we're
Yeah.
both traveling in motion, right? Not necessarily in motion, but we're both traveling on the same journey together, staring at this wall, right? I mean, and that's such a great example because I mean, unless you're at an art gallery, I don't know many people that like just stare at the wall. But let's say we're staring at a wall, right? It's a very nice wall. I mean, we're both traveling on the same journey. We're both traveling in motion, let's say, at this thing, right? Um, and we end up having different experiences, right? Doing that exact same thing, different, and then we end up leaving having different perspectives.
Yeah. And we won't be able to define the wall for someone else, because you had a perception about it, I had a different one. So the wall remains relative. The wall itself remains relative, right? Because in my eyes it's beautiful, in your eyes it's not. So the wall remains relative, and we remain only with a perspective on it, right?
Absolutely. I think, because like before talking to you about this, like my experience with relativity is space, time, and gravity.
Mm.
And so like in sci-fi movies, that was it. But it's good to bring those two together, right? Because people use it's relative. People use that word all the time. In like, and so now to get some kind of like an understanding of how somebody uses it in relation to themselves for their perspective, that's great. So the last part of this is we're going to take away relativity, we're going to take away perspective, and we're going to get down to reality, right? So now this topic I could go on forever. Perspective into reality, right? And because reality is hard to experience, without that bias, without that perspective, without, right?
Yes.
When I interact with people, right? Um, I try to interact with each person as a blank slate. So I can function similar to like a mirror. So like when I go to talk to somebody, whatever they send to me, the energy, how they're moving, micro expressions, body language, I typically mirror that. Not consciously, it just kind of happens, right? Um,
Yeah, you're very good at it.
each interaction, I go as a blank slate, right? To experience the reality of that interaction, okay? Or that person, right? Who is this person, right? I want to experience them, not just interact with them, right? But let's say if we're talking about something just simple as a blade of grass in time and space as reality. Okay. So now we've taken perspective. We're looking at this. Both you and I are looking at this blade of grass. You think it's blue. I think it's red. Okay. They both make purple. It's my favorite color, but you think it's blue. I think it's red. And we're looking at this blade of grass. We both have our perspectives, but in reality, the blade of grass is green, right? So we have to remove those layers of bias back in
Mm,
order to really get to the reality that is. And each person experiences reality different. So now we've kind of really bounced back and forth as life is traveling, as we're traveling through life, experiencing reality can come as a blank slate, but you really have to put effort into removing the bias, into
yeah.
removing your perspective in order to see it. And in order to do that, sometimes you have to experience things looking at it from all different angles, all different, I mean, physically looking at it from all different angles. Let's say we're talking about this blade of grass, right? You think it's purple, I think it's red. Reality, it's green. The only way we're going to be able to see that is if we walk around one blade of grass and look at it in all the different directions. And then we go back to having open mindedness, willingness to accept being wrong in order
Mm,
to live reality. The blade of grass is green, right?
yeah. Um, I've been thinking about this so many times, especially these days when everyone can translate the reality as they want and decide to ignore the scientific facts. And I think that every time this happens, we have to go back to the what is normal. What is normal, right? What's the definition of normal? Normality is something that a huge group of people decide that it's normal. That's normality. So we have to go back there. So we don't have the grass in front of our eyes, right? And you say the grass is red. I say no, it's blue. We have to go back to the general norm. What does the science says about grass? What is the general norm about grass? That it's green, and then we have to accept it. Of course, it's very important for some people like scientists not to accept some truth and try to find more about it. But when you talk about general reality, we already know the grass is green, right? We don't have to invent the wheel all over again.
Right, absolutely. I think scientists definitely should challenge themselves, right? So
Mm,
that's definitely a good observation to bring into this. Reality is the state of things as they actually exist without any
mm,
human like interpretation, right? So
yeah.
um, with that, like our perspective and our opinions and our biases change, our ideas will change, right? But reality is constant, it's consistent, right? So it doesn't change, right? And that's like the key thing here is like we have a reality. So if we're looking at life, reality is one strand of life, right? everybody's on their different perspective, and it touches that strand just a little bit and zigs over here and zigs over here, and each life is zigzagging across this like one line that we want to call reality down the middle, right? Every time somebody touches reality, they're getting a glimpse of it, but then they're, backing away from it because they're, perspective bias, belief system, culture, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Societal norms, kind of bounce into play. That's why I think it's important to have an open mind. I think it's very important to be open minded to reality, right? And, later on we'll get into podcasts about gaslighting and how people, manipulate other people to change their, perception of reality in order to
Mhm.
manipulate them. But in this context, reality is consistent, observable, and measurable. And perspective is opinion based, it's experience based, and it's a human interpretation. And relativity is relative motion and gravitational fields, space, time, that kind of thing. And then I think it's just so interesting how all of these things play into what I like to call the human experience.
That's so true. When you're talking about reality, I was thinking that sometimes it going back to reality without emotions, without our bias, like you're saying, can keep us sane in one given moment. We might feel that we're going crazy. I don't know what to do. I don't know what's happening. I don't know what the truth is anymore. So then we go back to reality without any emotions, and we get it from there and start building, let's say, again on it. So
Right.
reality is so important for a clear path.
Right. So, okay, I'll give you, okay, that's a good idea. I'm glad you brought that up. Like, so for me, let's bring up a like real world example. So for me, I absorb a lot of negative energy, like especially like corruption and lies and betrayal and stuff like that. I absorb it because I'm observing it, right? In order for me to, and then it forms like a perspective, usually because I'm a blank slate and I'm mirroring and I'm absorbing, I'm able to see through, deceptive practices, manipulation, and get down to the core of, reading between the lines, the reality of the situation, right? In order to get back to reality, let's say I'm absorbing all of this negativity, let's say I'm watching the news, as I do. Everyone around you tell me I'm like always in the news, watching for, like the next big corruption, the next big scandal, the next big truth, right? I'm looking for the truth. I want people to do the right thing. I want the truth. I want absolute freedom and peace. um when I'm watching the news and I'm seeing all that negativity, I have to take a step back and come back into reality that is right in front of me, right? I can't be globe trotting across the planet, diving into, all of the negative effects that are, negative events that are happening across the planet. Because if I do that, I just keep rabbit holing one into the next, one into the next. And I do have time for that, right? I've got a lot of energy, but there are times where I need to bring myself back
Mm,
to myself into reality. It's like almost like I'm reaching out too far and I'm stretching myself too thin if I keep going down that negative rabbit hole. So what I have to do is I have to come back, right? Bring myself into my brain, do some mindfulness, do some meditation, do some yoga, do some breathing exercises. And then I visualize, we talked about that earlier. I visualize maybe doing something in front of me, and then I'll go do it. Or I will meditate, close my eyes, and then I will open my eyes, and then I will start observing things. You worked with me when I was in prior to my narcissist court case, right? You worked with me on counting objects. You worked with me on mindfulness. You worked with me on, relating to things in that courtroom, that so I could stay grounded, right?
yeah.
Grounded right here. We hear that in yoga all the time. We use that in yoga. Um, so I'm not reaching out that far. opening my eyes, observing what's in front of me, right? So, like, let's say if I'm going down a rabbit hole, which I might have just been going down, I open my eyes, I look in front of me. What's in front of me? I've got my computer, I've got you, I've got my phone, right? I'm here, I'm alive, I'm breathing, right? I'm not dying, nobody's attacking me, right? I don't need to spring into action to help save somebody else. So the reality of the situation is right here and now, not out elsewhere. And without bias, right? I bring myself back here.
And without the emotions that such rabbit hole like corruption wars
Absolutely.
can bring with it. Yeah. So getting back
Absolutely.
into reality, grounding yourself, and losing these emotions that come with these negative situations.
Absolutely.
And for me, also the um, going back to reality can mean going back to nature. It's something we cannot we cannot how do you say it I mean, you cannot say that this is not a tree. It's a tree. For me, the most close to reality is nature, because you can never deny nature. That's something that's it's been here on the planet since day one. So you can never say this is not a tree, this is not a water, an ocean, a river, a mountain. So that's something we can count on to be there and bring us back all the time, every time, and ground us, the nature.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. And when I feel overwhelmed, right? So when I was going through my narcissistic abuse, I actually spent a lot of time in nature, being grounded, surrounded by, I'd go sit on, we talked about the mountain that's near here. It's a very small one. I would go sit on top of that. I would go walk on the beach, listening to the water. I would go walk on the sand. I would go, like in the forest and in the woods and hike on, trails and just be out in nature to get back to reality, right?
Yeah,
And recenter my focus, right?
yeah, it's amazing how nature can heal us for real. It can just take away all the. It's like almost like it can transform you into a, like you're saying, a blank uh page, and you
Yeah.
can start over. Yeah,
Start over. Yeah. And you can take those perspectives, right? And think about them, right? So, like, we've talked about introspection, right? On a previous podcast. I don't think I've
yeah,
said that word on this podcast, right? But when I'm in nature, right, I'm doing a lot of introspection, right? And I'm seeking that open mindedness. That way I can then, if I need to, change my perspective about a situation, make that change.
yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us on Life Chronicles and Deep Dives podcast. My name is Coach Micah Ranjit. This is Coach Cornelia, all the way in Romania, and we will see you in our next exciting episode. If you have any questions, comments, and you want to talk to us, go ahead and leave a comment down in the comment section below, as well as our websites are also linked in the description box. We'll see you next time.